I have it in mind to make some great big nails. But before we can do that, we need to make a great big nail header. Welcome to Black Bear Forge, where I hope to educate and entertain blacksmiths and non-blacksmiths alike in the ancient art and craft of blacksmithing. Before we can make really big nails or spikes, we need to make a heading tool. Before we can make a heading tool for a big square shanked nail, we need to make a square punch. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start by making a square punch. To do that, I'm starting with a piece of 3/4 inch square hardenable steel. In this case, it's a piece of sucker rod. I don't know the exact variety of sucker rod, but I expect that it's going to work just fine. This piece is 3/4 inches in diameter and it's 8.5 inches long. So let's put it in the fire and let's get started. As I usually do, I'm going to start by making a slight octagonal taper to the struck end. This is more aesthetic than anything else, but I kind of like the way it looks, and most of my tools look this way, so I'm going to keep it up. It's not a real big taper, just enough to concentrate the blows on the struck end right down the shaft of the tool. I'm going to come back just a little ways and put a little bit of a shoulder in and let it swell out sideways. This just helps provide a good place that I can index later. It helps keep the tool from twisting in my grip. And by aligning the working end with this flat, it's real easy to index it in the work. Just straighten it off. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my touch mark in here. I do that over at the treadle hammer, so I did not show it, just so I didn't have to move the camera. But it's my last name in the bear paw. Now typically on the other side I will put what kind of steel it is, what the variety of steel is. And I suspect this is 4140 or 4130, but I don't know, so I'm just going to leave that off on this tool. Maybe I should get a stamp made with a question mark on it so I know that's why it doesn't say anything. Or maybe mark it SR for sucker rod. But today, we'll just leave it blank. That's all I'm going to do to that end. I will turn it around and forge a square point, or not a square point, but a square taper down to about 1/2 inch. Now, keeping my square taper oriented with the flat that I made before, I'm going to go down to about 1/2 inch square. And blend that in nicely with the body of the punch. And try to keep it all straight. You can make this whatever size you want, just depends on what you need for a square punch. And we'll finish that up after it cools on the grinder. That's just right at 1/2 inch, so it'll be quick and easy to grind. Now I'll bring this back up to a dull red glow and then let it air cool or normalize. Now typically I would go ahead and anneal that or cool it more slowly in vermiculite, but to get it done today I'm just going to normalize it, then we can go ahead and finish it off. Well, here is our square punch. It's been ground, the end is dressed up nicely, and it's ready to harden and temper. For the sake of expediency, I'm just going to do this in the forge today. It will go a little bit faster, and it should result in just a fine hardening and tempering. Well, we have the entire tool up to heat now, and it's time to quench. I'm going to start just at the working end, the punch end, but I'm going to end up quenching the whole thing. Because I'm doing it more so down at the punch end, that will be harder. And it gives me a little bit of a variable hardness, so it's not quite so hard where I hit it with the hammer. It did not get super hard, but it should be okay. It's still going to be a tough steel, but since we don't know exactly what it is, sometimes it's hard to say one way or the other. But we'll try it. I'm going to go ahead and temper this in the toaster oven at about 400 for an hour. Looks like this might be the third day in a row we get some rain around here. That's pretty cool. While our punch tempers in the toaster oven, I thought I would go ahead and get started on the actual heading tool. And I'm going to do this out of two pieces, mild steel for a handle and a base, and a smaller piece of 4140 that I will forge weld to the mild steel. You can certainly do this out of a single piece of something like half-inch thick 4140, half by one would probably be just fine. Draw out the handle on it, or just cut a square piece off at the end and arc weld a handle on, which would be just fine. This one's drawn out of something heavier. I don't remember what the material was, but it works. It's a lot more work to draw it out than it is to forge weld it. So we're just going to forge weld it and save ourselves a little bit of work. The piece I'm going to use for a handle is 5/16 by 1. Nothing special about that, it's just what I happen to have. And this piece of 4140 that I found, or cut it off the end of another block, is actually 1¼ inch by 1½ inch, half-inch thick, so it's a little bit too big. So I'm going to bring that down so that it fits this before I do the forge weld. That's just almost what I want. In the long run, this is a much bigger piece than I probably need, but it should work just fine. I want to bevel off the end here. That's just mostly to make it neater, although on one side, where it goes to the handle, I do want to form something more like a scarf. Went ahead and took the liberty of putting this scarf in on the belt grinder. And it just needs to have a taper that blends in nicely. It doesn't need to be a very fancy scarf. Now the real hard part here, I'm going to need to balance this on the end of this bar in the fire and then back out for the forge weld. So I have to be very careful. I'm going to start by getting it hot though, then I'll put it back on here after I flux it. I'm just going to put a little bit of flux on there. It doesn't need much. I don't want to make it slippery. It would be a real problem if I was using borax. But I got to keep this up in the fire. I can't turn it and rotate it. But since the tool steel welds at a lower temperature, that works out okay. So this is about up to welding heat. I'm going to take it out of the fire very carefully and just a few quick light blows to get it to stick. And hopefully that's stuck. Seems to be. Now I should be able to turn it over in the fire and keep it more evenly hot. Even up the edges here. The next thing I want to do is just work right on the scarf down here. We'll get that scarf to seal down nicely. Thicken this just a little bit right up there towards where the heading portion will be. This is more aesthetic than anything else. Although making the handle a little bit thicker there will help keep it from being as likely to bend. So that is ready to put a hole in. So we're going to punch from the back side. This is a tapered punch, so if we punch all from the back side, or almost all from the back side, we'll end up with a hole that flares out at the bottom, and that helps keep our spike from getting stuck. So we want to do most of our punching from the back, which makes it a little harder to hold on to this. As always, try to keep your punch cool. Every time I cool it, I'm going to rotate the punch 90 degrees just in case it isn't quite square. But we're getting a nice start of a hole. It feels like it's hitting pretty solid on the anvil now. Let's turn it up and punch through. And there's our hole, and there's all the slug we sheared out. I'm going to clean this hole up a little bit from the back side here. We're a little off center, but it's not going to hurt the tool any. And I'm starting to get just a little tiny bit of weld shear there, so I'm going to take another welding heat. It's just right at that scarf, which is always a problem with something of this nature. Just be careful not to make your handle too thin right there. Okay. I'm fairly happy with that, although it's going to need some grinding to make it look prettier, I think. But we can do that off camera. I think I'll finish this handle. And I don't know if it needs to be this long. I'm just going to cut that off. I'm just going to continue this taper I started earlier a little ways. Going to round up the edges just to make it a more comfortable tool to hold on to. Make sure that this is flat so it'll sit flat on the anvil. Now I'm going to spread and thin this end a little bit, just to make it more comfortable and perhaps a little bit springy where you get to the point that you're gripping it. This end where I cut it's going to need a little bit of filing or grinding. Do that with a hot rasp if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and punch a round hole in into the handle here. That is just a place we can hang it on a nail later. So that's pretty much the forging for the nail header. Just like the punch, I'm going to go ahead and bring that up to temperature. Only this time I'm going to bury it in the vermiculite so it can slow cool. And then I'll be able to file and grind this head a little easier and try and make that look more like what I want it to look like. Well, that's where I'm going to call it a day. That needs to cool in the vermiculite overnight, so we're going to let it do that. And then tomorrow I will grind it, file it, do whatever I need to do to clean it up. Then we'll harden it, temper it, and then we'll get on to the nail project. And I will explain at that time just what it is I have in mind with these great big nails and why I wanted to make a big nail header. So I hope you found that video interesting. I hope you can give it a thumbs up. Love it if you'd hit that subscribe button. Stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends, but then make time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, challenge your creativity, but do stay safe and do wear your safety glasses, and we'll see you for the next one.